Hi guys, I'm Carmen.
And I'm Jennifer.
And together we are the Vagina Blueprint.
We are changing the way we talk about women's health, so make sure you're subscribed on your favorite streaming platform.
The information in this podcast is intended as general education only and should not be used as medical advice, treatment, or assessment.
We can't wait to share our passion with you and bring you in on this conversation. Today we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what the anatomy of the pelvic floor is, what it does, how it functions, all the fun stuff. So why don't you dive in?
Oh man. Okay. You want the long or the Coles notes? No, let's do like the medium notes.
Yeah, the in between, because I feel like we know some things, but it always helps to like have a little bit more of a bird's eye view.
Yes. Yeah. And I always say knowledge is power, right? So
pussy power.
You can't, power blah, blah, blah.
I'm not allowed to say that. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
You said it.
I just said it.
It's going in there.
It's called the Vagina Blueprint. If you don't know, like, now you know.
Now you know. Anatomy. So the way I always explain it to patients is, first of all, the pelvic floor is a group of muscles that sits at the base of the pelvis like a bowl shape. The organs sit inside that bowl of muscles. So you have your bladder. So for those YouTubers, you can kind of watch on the video here. So you've got all your organs that sit inside. You've got your bladder that sits in first. And then you have your uterus with your vaginal canal that sits on top and behind the bladder. So kind of tucked over that in an L shape there. And then you've got your colon that sits in the back. So all three of those parts of the organ sit kind of tucked in the bowl there. What I always kind of laugh about here is you can see, once you see the anatomy, how and why we pee our pants and feel like our vagina is exploding when we're carrying a baby.
Absolutely. Like literally sitting on top of it.
Literally, like imagine a 7-pound baby sitting just right on top of your little bladder.
It's a little pillow.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's punching and kicking the egg. Yeah. The worst.
Yeah.
So all those organs sit tucked in there. As we mentioned in the last episode, one of the functions of the pelvic floor is to hold those organs up, right? So if the pelvic floor is not functioning properly, it's not going to support those organs properly. So that's really important. If you look at the base of the pelvis here, you can see that we have our vaginal opening and our rectal opening. So for the podcasters, I want you to imagine kind of a line top to bottom. So we're going from the pubic bone in the front to the tailbone in the back, and you've got the first one that comes from the pubic bone is your clitoris with the clitoral hood that hugs over that, and then you've got your vaginal opening, and below the vaginal opening you've got what we call the perineal body, and so it's a piece of tissue between the rectum and the vaginal opening. So below that you have your rectal opening, and then you have a ligament that basically goes and attaches to the tailbone. So your pelvic floor literally comes from the front of that pubic bone that you kind of feel in the front of your vagina there, and it comes all the way back to where your tailbone is. So it really spans quite a distance, and some of those muscles are actually all the same. Like part of the levator ani muscles go right from the tailbone all the way to the front and loop around, right? So this is one thing that I'll run into with my patients. You know, if you have a tailbone injury, that can affect whether you are able to pee properly or not, depending on how you heal from that, right? So yeah, like the anatomy spans that whole width. What else can I say about the pelvic floor? Anything that you can think to add in there?
Just going back to the tailbone injuries, hurt mine a couple times, but when you have that, like that's why sometimes if you've had that too, it feels like you have a UTI, like even though you don't. It's like that tension that it creates because your body's now in that protective mode.
Right.
That's really interesting how it like just all.
For sure. And that's it. Like I'll have patients all the time that have pelvic floor issues, but haven't had a baby and they don't understand why. And a lot of times we can kind of trace it back to some kind of tailbone injury
Falling
when
on
they were
your
younger.
butt at skating.
Yeah. Yes. Oh,
Trying a double axel. Who the hell was I to do that?
Yeah. Why?
I
For
was just
what
being
purpose?
Wonder Woman that day. I was feeling it. And I was like, I'm going to do a double axel.
Oh.
But I didn't. I cracked my tailbone.
Okay. For our non-figure skating people, what is a double axel?
Oh, God. It's a 2.5 times around in the front face. Like you
In the air.
In the air. You go into this jump front facing. You just throw your body into the air. You whip it around 2.5 times. It's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
Mid-air on the ice, wearing blades on your feet.
No padding because we're not hockey players. We're figure skaters. So
yeah.
Barefoot? Did you skate barefoot?
Oh yeah.
For sure, right?
Oh, 100%.
Way better.
I have feet problems now.
Me too.
Oh, I'm barefoot in the dead of winter,
Yes.
and people don't understand. I'm like, I used to skate barefoot. I don't know. I just don't like wearing shoes.
Mm-mm.
I mean, socks.
I hate wearing socks, but I like to be able to feel the ground.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I walked barefoot as a kid all the time.
Right? It's good for your
100%.
pelvic floor.
Oh, it's so good. If your feet are not functioning properly, it moves up the chain, ladies and gentlemen.
And vice versa, right?
Yes,
Like if you
100%.
have some weird stuff going on, it could be affecting your feet too.
100%. So, yeah, the anatomy of the pelvic floor, that basically covers the basics. The other thing that I will often kind of mention to patients as well is that the muscles of the pelvic floor sit at the base, but then because it's shaped like a bowl, they come up into the inside of the hip as well. So a lot of muscles that people would think are hip muscles are actually considered pelvic floor muscles,
Yes.
like the piriformis, obturator internus, coccygeus, all those are actually pelvic floor muscles. And so a lot of people that have sciatica or sciatic type symptoms, if it's coming from the hip, as we would call it, it often is because of the piriformis muscle.
Yes.
Because the piriformis muscle actually has the sciatic nerve traveling through it. So oftentimes if there's an issue with that piriformis muscle, it can put pressure, it can irritate, it can aggravate the sciatic nerve, causing those sciatic type symptoms.
Yes.
Right? And so a lot of people think, oh, I have sciatica, I've got a hip problem, or I've got a low back problem, when in reality, it's a pelvic floor problem all along.
Right? And you don't address it from that route.
Yeah. It's so important. And it's something I think that, again, it's another one of those areas where we see pelvic floor dysfunction, but you're not necessarily presenting with the incontinence or the leaking,
not the
like
things
you would
think.
presume. Yeah, it could be literal hip pain or knee pain that you're presenting with, and we have to check the pelvic floor to make sure it's functioning properly. Yeah. And I will argue that most people's pelvic floor does not function optimally. Not that it doesn't function properly, but it doesn't function optimally because 9 times out of 10, we're not using it. Right now, you and I sitting in these chairs, we're not using our pelvic floors.
Oh my gosh, with my legs crossed? Like, no.
We're not using our pelvic floors. The chair is holding us up.
Yes.
And how many of us sit in chairs all day long, not using our pelvic floor? And then I will often take patients back to when they first started going to school. So 4 years old, you're starting in a classroom, you're sitting for 6 hours a day, never using your pelvic floor during that time. And
That's a great point.
We have pelvic floor issues from day one, especially kids now, because they've got all the electronics, they've got all the games inside, they're not going out like they used to. And so these pelvic floor problems are stemming from a very young age. And I always say we're not using our pelvic floors the way they're designed to be used because we're not moving our bodies the way they were designed to be used.
Yes, absolutely.
Our ancestors were climbing walls, chasing food, growing crops, walking everywhere they went, pooping in a squatting position. They were eating in a squatting position. Yes. They were moving in a way that we just don't. And today we have cars that take us everywhere we go.
Yep.
We have chairs that we can sit in and have a conversation like this. We can eat at a desk, sit on a chair to eat. We go to poop on a toilet, not in a hole in the ground. We no longer squat.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why we have constipation and hip pain and back pain and pelvic floor problems. But it really
anxiety.
does.
The anxiety thing.
Man.
You guys will get to know. I am all about like the emotions that the pelvic floor holds and like how that affects us in our mental state, because it just does. And like being able to breathe is huge. And so many people are walking around just not breathing properly. And that impacts the pelvic floor because, again, same thing, right? Like if you're not using all of this whole core canister well, it's not just one thing that's going to be affected. You're not just going to pee your pants. It's like the whole gamut.
No, 100%. So that kind of sums up the anatomy. Can you think of anything else like that you explain to patients to try and kind of hone in on that?
I think like the big thing when I'm talking to like my clients is that they understand that like the core canister. We hear this word core canister, but what the hell is the core canister, right? Like they think it's your 6-pack abs, and it's just like dismissive of the top of the canister, the bottom of the canister, and like it's a round thing, right? There's all these muscles all the way around. And so I just think like when we talk about it, there needs to be more of a visual and an emphasis on the top and the bottom of that canister being a part of the whole too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's such a good analogy. It's so true. The can wouldn't be able to function if it didn't have a top and a bottom.
It's just a cylinder.
The contents would just fall out.
Right? It's not a canister. It's just a
our
tube.
Contents would ever fall out. I think that's a real fear for a lot of women.
It is, yeah. If you have some
it
prolapse,
will never happen. No matter how bad the prolapse gets, you will never fall out. I promise you. However, it does need to be addressed.
Yes, absolutely.
But your organs will never fall out. Your body does a very good job of backing up what the pelvic floor is not doing.
It'll find a way.
If you feel like you're falling out,
definitely
talk to your nearest pelvic floor physiotherapist. I promise we can help.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very valid fear.
Yeah, but this is where, again, I always say knowledge is power. So we have to know how these things work, because if you don't know how it works, how are you going to understand how to fix it? You know, like if you don't know how to make a casserole, how are you ever going to make it? What are you going to do? Just throw random things? Like, let's try some cinnamon, and let's now put some chili powder, and let's do some sugar. And that, I don't know, that might be good because I'm not the best cook.
Sounds like you're making cinnamon rolls, which is not a casserole, but
powder.
Spicy cinnamon rolls.
But seriously, if you don't know what food tastes like, if you don't know what foods go together, sure, you can follow the recipe, but unless you've made that before and you understand it, it's not going to turn out the way that you intended it to turn out. You can't just randomly throw things together. Right? Yeah. So, and this is where it's key. There is a recipe. There is a way that we can help the pelvic floor. It doesn't have to be something that you live with. It doesn't have to be something that you suffer with. It's not just I had babies, so of course I pee my pants. I'm just going to have to live with this for the rest of my life. No, there is always a way to help manage those symptoms. Yes. And in most cases, we can resolve symptoms like that fairly quickly.
Right? It's just a matter of like reconnecting and like recoordinating. That's usually like my two things that I address. Reconnect and recoordinate.
Yeah, 100%. Don't throw the ingredients together. Find the recipe. Yeah. Because it's a pretty easy recipe.
I have it. I'll share.
That's the cool thing too, though. There's multiple recipes and you can tweak it dependent on the person.
What's your flavor?
Like what works for you. And so that's the great thing about it too. You know, like we can tweak it to the lifestyle.
Yes.
There's a recipe for your pelvic floor dysfunction, and we can make it your own.
I love that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love you.
Love you. That's going to be our ending all the time, I think.
I like it.
Yes.